always a wonderful day together honoring Audie Murphy and, of course, all veterans everywhere. I always think every year that how are we going to beat last year's? Last year we had Martha Bolton. She was a writer for Bob Hope and all of his programs, and it was just fascinating, all those tours they did around the world. Kevin Brody was an actor, and his father, Stephen Brody, and he's a producer. He was fascinating. Talk about his relationship with the Audie Murphy family, actually Audie Murphy himself. But we're glad you're here today, and at this time we'll post the colors. If you'll please stand.
Word after that arse. Come left, arch. Background, arc. Hey, oh. Right, who's? Rest and post colors.
Permission granted.
2. Present Hans. For the Hans. Return. Black chain. Left, haste. Forward. After that, harsh. I left, bark.
Maybe seat. We'd like to open up the session today with an invocation. We ask Pastor Dylan Reagan to come forward and offer a prayer.
Good morning. Bow with me for a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for a time to be here and for the memory of the veterans and all that we are gathered here to remember and celebrate today. We ask that you'd be with us as we have this time. It's in your name. Amen.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to ask Sergeant First Class Beatty to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll please be standing again.
I'd like to face the flag. Place your right hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, for liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
May be seated. Is Chelsea Areola here with us? Didn't make it? Okay. She was going to do the national anthem. You do not want me to lead singing today. I've asked several other people, unless somebody wants to volunteer, we'll forego this today. Okay. I don't have any takers on that, but thank you. At this time, we'll ask our board president of the Audie Murphy American Cotton Museum to come forward and offer a welcome from the museum. Mr. Gary Oxley, sir.
Well, what a great turnout. Thank you all so much for coming to our Audie Murphy Day commemorative. Really appreciate seeing everyone. I was asked to keep my remarks brief, and that shouldn't be too much of a problem. And I'm really hesitant to tell you this. I was sitting in my living room this morning. My wife asked me what I was thinking about. I said, "Well, I've got to speak to some people that here at the center, and not necessarily sure as to what I want to cover." So she said, "Well, you need to start off with a little humor." And I thought, well, not necessarily the right venue, but she said, "No, I've got a good one for you." So, I mean, folks, please don't blame me. She turned and she said, "Where do squirrels go in a tornado?" And I thought for a moment, and I go, "I have no idea." She goes, "Everywhere." So that's my bit of humor for the morning. Thanked everyone for coming out. This has been an exciting year for the Audie Murphy Museum. This year we completed a walking history tour of Hunt County. So those of you who haven't been to the museum in a while, you should come out and see this. It's an outdoor exhibit that has, I think we have 16 murals or something, 15 murals of depicting events in Hunt County, the industry, people, and I think you'd find it quite interesting if you were to come and visit with us. We also, if you'd been out, you'd know that our road was in really disrepair, and thanks to the Board of Development here in Greenville, Greg Sims in particular, their willingness to invest in the museum, we've now got a new paved road. So, as I said, it's been an exciting, I don't know how exciting you find that, but for us, it's exciting. I want to thank Larry Winters and Ron Robbins. I don't believe Mr. Robinson's here. They served on this year's Audie Murphy committee, helping Susan put this event together. And lastly, I want to thank our museum director, Susan Lanning, and her museum director assistant, Kristen Steele, for all their hard work in making this event happen. Not only this, but every year. It's always a great event for the museum, and appreciate everybody coming out. I was going to bore everyone with thanking all of our sponsors. If you'll look in the back of your brochure, you'll find an extensive list of people and companies who've donated in order to help, again, make this event happen. I'd like to remind everyone that after this morning's program, if you'd like to return or go to the museum at 2 o'clock, we're going to begin another set of events and things that might interest you. So we'd invite you to the museum after around 2. And lastly, Susan put together, I think you'll find a wonderful program commemorating Audie Murphy, and thanks so much for you all coming. Thank you.
I need to smile for the camera, Susan, and make sure it's adjusted good. I might mention while Susan's adjusting that camera, Gary mentioned our outdoor exhibit. It was very interesting on it. It's a fantastic venue that we have there. It goes along the sidewalk and ends at Audie Murphy, the statue of Audie, the one we have out front. But our wonderful leader at the museum, we tried to get Claire Chenault in there. He was born in Hunt County, by the way. Maybe we can cover that sometime. The Flying Tigers. And Susan said, no, we're not putting anything outside that we don't already have inside the museum. So it's a lot of local history of people that have done very well in their careers, and that's what's on the outdoor exhibit, and it's very interesting. We also wanted to mention that on June 22nd, next month, we're celebrating Audie Murphy's birthday, and that'll be at the museum. So if you can put that on your calendar. We have an actor, Duffy Hudson, is coming in. If you haven't seen him, he's amazing. Last time I introduced him a few years back, he was here, just introduced me as Audie, and he comes in, just takes the role, and you think it's Audie in front of you. But that's June 21st. He'll be here with us. Susan, are we ready for the first speaker? We're good? Okay. Well, the reason I was asked, you have the computer program and everything you need? Okay, you're good. All right. All right, I have the honor and pleasure of introducing our first speaker. I'm going to read it to you, please. Dr. Terrence Ferguson is a professor of history at Cullen College and holds a doctorate from the University of North Texas. with a concentration in American military history. During his graduate studies, he became aware of the Texas operations of North American aviation. If you put this in, thinking 1940-ish, late 30s, this is going to be really fascinating, which led him to doing more research on the subject and eventually to his new book, The Dallas Story, the North American Aviation Plant and Industrial Mobilization During World War II. Prior to the factory opening in 1941, the city of Dallas had practically no existing industrial base. That's really, I can't wait to hear this. Despite this deficiency, the residents quickly learned the craft of manufacturing airplanes. By the end of the war, the Texas Division of North American Aviation, NAA, had manufactured 19,000 airplanes, making it one of the most prolific U.S. factories. Please join me and let's welcome Dr. Terrence Ferguson. Oh, right here, sis.
Well, good morning. Can you hear me okay? All right. I was speaking in tarot last week. I had a bad habit of turning and doing this away from the microphone, so I'll try to avoid that. I was telling one of the other speakers, it's always intimidating to come speak to a group of aficionados. I'm a history professor, so I teach, it's a required course. This will solve that problem. Testing. How's that? That work? All right, now I can move around. Sorry for the, that's worse. Where's the roadies when you need them? All right. Testing. All right. Where was I? Oh, I'm usually speaking to college students, and so I've, kind of reassured to the fact that most of them aren't paying any attention. So, it's always nice to speak to a group of people who are actually interested in the history, but the scary part is some of them may actually know some of it and catch you if you make a mistake. With the kids, if you say something wrong, one say, well, President Grant signed the Declaration of Independence. Oh, okay. So anyway, Dallas Story, stupid name for a book. My editor hated it. Okay, but it's based on this ad. This is an ad that was in Life magazine. How can you not want to call your book The Dallas Story when you can show this ad? Right. So I have some prepared remarks here because if I just wing it and ad-lib it, we'll be here for 4 hours, and I understand there's 2 other speakers. So I've got a script. I kind of hate to do it that way, but it keeps me focused. If you could put that first slide up. We'll leave this up for a while because it gives you an idea of where we were prior to World War II. Okay. This was from a speech given by General Frank Andrews at the Army War College. I have a sneaking suspicion Andrews Air Force Base is probably named after this guy. I don't know that for a fact. But this is where we stood June 1938. Okay. So I can just leave that up for a minute so you can kind of soak it in. All right. So here's the spiel. So during World War II, American industry produced a multitude and variety of weapons from factories across the United States. Some of these facilities are well known, notably the Ford Willow Run aircraft plant in Michigan or the Kaiser shipyards in California. But I'm here today to tell you about a plant located on the outskirts of Dallas, Texas. Operated by the North American Aviation Company, NAA, the factory is arguably the premier example of industrial mobilization, yet the plant is largely forgotten and its contributions to war effort are overlooked. So how did Dallas, a city with no pre-existing aircraft manufacturing industry, become the location for an airplane factory? The answer begins with President Franklin D. Roosevelt, and the year 1938 offers a starting point for discussion. In his State of the Union address on 3rd of January, Roosevelt referred to a world of high tension and disorder. He stated, "We must keep ourselves adequately strong in self-defense." On 20th January, the President made recommendations to Congress. Roosevelt wanted greater funding for the Navy, 2 new battleships, ammunition for the Army, an increase in anti-aircraft materials, and more than $6 million to manufacture industrial tooling. Nothing was explicitly stated regarding aviation at this time. Can we give the next slide? Oh, go. Okay, we've found the clicker. The momentum for readiness accelerated after Germany annexed Austria in March of 1938. On the 29th of April, presidential advisor Bernard Baruch wrote a letter to Roosevelt. Baruch had been the head of the War Industries Board during World War I. He called for the acquisition of machinery to produce gunpowder, the manufacture of artillery, semi-automatic infantry rifles, and then, quote, then airplanes and more airplanes, end quote. White House files suggest an interest in military aviation during the middle of 1938, but air power is just one part of a readiness problem. An increased focus on aviation was brought about by the Czechoslovakian crisis in the autumn of 1938. After listening to a speech by Adolf Hitler on 12th of September, Roosevelt ordered Harry L. Hopkins, was head of the WPA, to, quote, go out to the Pacific coast and take a look at the aircraft industry with a view to its expansion for war production, end quote. At the end of September came the Munich Conference, which accelerated actions of the White House. William C. Bullitt, the United States ambassador to France, returned to Washington on 13th October and briefed Roosevelt. French officials believed that Hitler had been emboldened by his Air Force, backed by an industry capable of rapid expansion. According to historian Mark Watson, President Roosevelt became convinced for the first time that American airplane production should be greatly stimulated with all possible speed. The French believed the Germans possessed a superior air force, and they took steps accordingly. France ordered 100 Curtiss H-75 fighters on 13th May 1938. That would be the P-36 for you gearheads in the crowd, with an option to purchase more. But were concerns about the German aircraft industry well-founded? The French had legitimate fears, for they were substantiated by representatives of the American aviation industry who had visited European aircraft factories. These men grasped the implications of what they saw in the German factories they visited. Next slide. Oh, that's right, I've got the clicker. All right. One such visitor was Lawrence Bell of Bell Aircraft, who toured Germany, Italy, France, and Great Britain during the summer of 1938. On 12 September, the same day as the previously mentioned speech by Hitler, Bell submitted a confidential report describing his observations and ranking the capabilities of each country's aviation industry. Bell rated Germany as a 10, England as a 5, Italy as a 2, and France merely at 1. Germany, he estimated, produced 8,000 to 10,000 planes per year in modern, efficient factories. Bell's report described the European aviation industry, but what about the United States? As previously mentioned, the President asked Harry Hopkins to investigate this in September. Hopkins apparently assigned the task to Major Alfred J. Lyons of the Army Air Corps, who responded with a memorandum on 3 November 1938. Lyons listed 12 manufacturers of military aircraft with a large concentration in Southern California. Other manufacturers were based along the eastern seaboard. The industry was operating below capacity, with an estimated 1,200 aircraft produced in 1938. Lyons calculated that existing facilities could produce 7,500 airplanes per year. To expand beyond that would require additional factories. But aviation companies would be hesitant to expend capital building facilities that may be unneeded. If increased Army procurement proved to be short-term, the industry could find itself with expensive plants sitting idle. One possible answer was for the government to construct and operate aircraft factories. This would be a problem, as many firms depended on military orders to survive. If the government built its own aircraft, it would harm the aviation industry on which any major production program would depend. Plus, the government lacked experience in designing and manufacturing airplanes on a large scale. Around this time, Roosevelt established an aircraft committee to study the problem. On 28 October, only 3 days after it was created, the group called for production capacity of 15,000 aircraft annually within 2 years. The committee also advocated the building of additional factories by the government capable of manufacturing 16,000 planes per year. A follow-up letter on 2 November identified possible locations for plants, including the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So in the weeks after the Munich Conference, which of course is when they gave Hitler the Sudetenland, part of Czechoslovakia, So weeks after the Munich conference, a variety of sources provided Roosevelt with information about military aviation. He called a meeting at the White House to discuss the situation. Held on 14th November, it was attended by Roosevelt, Hopkins, and members of the cabinet. Military officials were also present, including Army Chief of Staff Malin Craig, Deputy Chief George C. Marshall, and Henry H. Arnold of the Air Corps. Sources agree that Roosevelt controlled the conversation. Historian Mark Watson relates that the president did most of the speaking as if his mind had been made up by earlier discussion and appraisal. Historian Irving B. Hawley Jr. said Roosevelt, quote, did not ask for advice, he laid his positions on the line. Roosevelt wanted to dramatically increase the strength of the Air Corps. He desired an on-the-air force of 20,000 airplanes and an annual productive capacity of 24,000. There were political considerations, however. With the Depression ongoing and with isolationist sentiments common among Americans, Roosevelt requested a less ambitious goal. He wanted a program for 10,000 planes over a 2-year period, of which 8,000 would come from existing plants and 2,000 from new plants built with government funds. FDR also desired the creation of an unused plant capacity for producing 10,000 airplanes per year. The program called for the government to build 7 aircraft factories, of which 2 would go into operation. The remaining plants would be held in reserve. There were many things to consider when selecting locations to these plants. New factories should be far inland to provide better protection against attack. The forever requirements. Factories needed plentiful and reliable electrical service. Railroad access would be useful for bringing in materials. An airfield would be necessary to fly out finished aircraft, and moderate weather would assist in that regard. Finally, there had to be an available pool of workers to operate the factory. All those requirements were satisfied by Dallas, Texas. Of course, the war breaks out September 1st, 1939, with the invasion of Poland. Oh, we're skipping over that because we're talking about airplanes. All right. So as the calendar flips into 1940, the war in Europe at this point was static. But in the spring, Hitler seized the initiative. The Germans attacked France, rapidly gaining the upper hand. On 15th of May, Winston Churchill received a call from his French counterpart who lamented, quote, we have been defeated, we are beaten, we have lost the battle, end quote. A surprised Churchill promptly sent a communication to Roosevelt asking for American support to Great Britain. Churchill requested 40 or 50 of your older destroyers and, quote, several hundred of the latest types of aircraft. The success of the Germans was on Roosevelt's mind as he delivered an address to Congress on 16th May. That's the next day. Okay. He listed a number of military needs, but emphasized aircraft, calling for additional production capacity. He then requested previously unseen numbers. In November of 1938, he had talked of 20,000 aircraft. Now Roosevelt wanted a program to provide 50,000 planes. Furthermore, he wanted an industrial capacity capable of producing 50,000 planes per year. Roosevelt wanted aircraft and aircraft factories. The question of what kind of aircraft was unanswered. Also unknown was who would build them and where it would be done. In Texas, the members of the Dallas Chamber of Commerce were working to make their city part of the answer. Civic leaders had long been interested in bringing the aircraft industry to Dallas. In 1928, the city established an aviation plan after purchasing Love Field in 1927 for use as a municipal airport. The city also owned Hensley Field, which was leased to the United States Army. This airfield was visited by a congressional delegation on 13th November 1939 as part of a tour of Air Corps facilities. The visitors were greeted by leadership from the Dallas Chamber of Commerce. The businessmen presumably took the opportunity to advocate locating an aviation plant in Dallas. They probably found receptive ears, as Texas had friends in high places. United States Vice President John Nance Garner was a Texan, as was Sam Rayburn, the House Majority Leader. These efforts apparently bore fruit. The spring of 1940 brought visitors to Dallas from 2 aviation firms who were scouting locations for factories. On 18th June 1940, the directors of the Dallas Chamber of Commerce met to consider the situation. It had been just 4 weeks since FDR had issued his call for 50,000 airplanes, and mere days since representatives of Consolidated Aircraft had discussed their needs with the city government and Chamber of Commerce. Ben Kritz, vice president of the chamber, believed that Consolidated was ready to come to Dallas so the city could meet the requirements. There were concerns the opportunity might be lost without quick, decisive action. In 2 days, the chamber formulated a plan to buy the necessary land. 18 Dallas businessmen committed themselves to bringing the factory to Dallas, with or without cooperation from the city government. On 5th of July, the Dallas Morning News featured a banner headline declaring $8 million plane factory employing 5,000 to be built here. It would be the largest single plant in Texas. The announcement was made in San Diego, California by Consolidated Aircraft and in Dallas by the Chamber of Commerce. But it turned out to be inaccurate news. The announced facility was never built due to decisions made by the federal government. For some time, federal officials have been contemplating how to finance expansion of the aviation industry. Now, with the president's call for 50,000 aircraft, the need to resolve this issue became paramount. Various concepts were explored, but the most important source of funding, and one that eventually impacted Dallas, was the Reconstruction Finance Corporation. There was a belief that the RFC could play a role in defense financing. Congress passed legislation allowing the RFC to lend money for defense efforts, with the measure being signed by President Roosevelt on 25th June 1940. Things are happening very quickly, which is unusual for government work. Having agreed to finance industrial expansion, the national government determined which facilities and companies received priority. With both Consolidated and North American Aviation eyeing Dallas, it was necessary to choose. It appeared Consolidated held the upper hand, but executives of North American wrote a series of letters to government officials to sway the decision in their favor, and North American was awarded the factory site. Once again, the newspapers announced the building of an airplane factory in Dallas, but this time the reports were accurate. On 17th August, the Daily Times Herald featured a front-page headline declaring Dallas gets big plane factory. The next day, the Dallas Morning News broke the news to its Sunday readers, announcing the impending construction of a North American factory next to Hensley Field. Hensley Field, by the way, is the old Naval Air Station, if you're familiar with that. At this time, the exact method of financing the plant had yet to be finalized. Eventually, the costs were covered by the Defense Plant Corporation, which was created on 22nd August 1940 as a subsidiary of the RFC. The DPC made a preliminary decision on 21st October when a lease agreement was authorized with North American. Formal auction occurred on 14th November during a meeting of the DPC directors held in Washington. The DPC would be the actual owner of the factory, with North American leasing the facility. The estimated startup cost was officially calculated at $7,961,349. While the government sorted out details, construction was already underway. A groundbreaking ceremony was held on 28th of September. A general contract was announced on 1st November, with work scheduled to begin within 2 weeks. The construction team struggled against torrential rains in November, creating what one reporter termed a mudkrig. Despite this, work progressed. Concrete was poured in November, and upright steel started being put into place on 2nd December. By the end of the year, which 1940, by the end of the year 1940, approximately 50% of the steelwork had been completed on the main factory building as the factory started to rise from what had been cotton fields. Construction was finished ahead of schedule, and it was the first emergency plan to begin operation. This is the plant. The cars give you the idea of the scale. Right. Is there a pointer on this? Did you notice there's a pointer on it? I think it does. I start pushing buttons, let's see what happens. Okay. So here's the car. This is the administration building, and this is the factory. And then this is the hangar for the finished airplanes, and there's like hammer press shops and stuff over here. Okay. This assembly line runs right along here. Planes come out. Dallas is over here. Fort Worth's over here. Okay, so planes come out this direction. Hensley Field would be like over here to fly them out. Okay. All right. Building the plane was a significant event for the city of Dallas. The major newspapers featured special sections on Sunday, 6th of April, 1941, with articles about North American, the factory, and the AT-6 trainer aircraft to be built there. Entire pages of advertisements welcomed the new business. To celebrate the occasion, North American held an open house for the public that day. Planners anticipated 25,000 people might attend the scheduled 4-hour event. Instead, there were that many on hand when the gates opened at 2 p.m. When the gates were finally closed at 7 o'clock, an estimated 60,000 people had toured the factory. Others listened at home to a live broadcast on local radio station KGKO. No one knew that the attack on Pearl Harbor was 35 weeks away. Official dedication ceremonies took place the next day. Key executives from North American were present, including Chairman of the Board Ernest R. Breach and Company President James Dutch Kindleberger. The Air Corps sent Major General George H. Brett and William S. Knudsen represented the Office of Production Management. Knudsen had been head of General Motors. Texas Governor W. Leo Daniels served as the official host for the occasion. Among the guests were Dallas Mayor Woodall Rogers and A&G Carter, Fort Worth. The dignitaries gathered inside the plant for luncheon, then adjourned to the nearby aircraft hangar where speeches would be given. Ernest Breach served as master of ceremonies, with Governor Daniel giving the opening remarks. Kindleberger, Brett, and Knudsen also spoke. Parts of the ceremony went out across the mutual broadcasting system, providing coverage of the event from coast to coast. The opening of the plant was a national story. After the speeches concluded, the proceedings moved to the flight ramp where Brett accepted delivery of the first 3 Dallas-built AT-6 trainers. Army pilots manned the aircraft and took off from Hensley Field, returning to circle over the crowd. It had been 192 days since the groundbreaking ceremony, and the Texas Division of North American had delivered its first aircraft. It was just the beginning. So this is William Knudsen. Actually, he'd been head of General Motors, but now he's one of Rosedale's star yearmen. This is James Kindleberger, called me Dutch, the head of North American Aviation. General Brett, and then sorted Army officers. On 24th of July, the NAA Board of Directors met in Dallas. They toured the plant and inspected the 100th aircraft produced there. This averages out to about 25 planes a month, and Dutch Kindleberger reported that production was 2.5 months ahead of schedule. Plans call for 12,000 employees, building 400 trainers a month, and the plan had orders totaling $108 million. Conditions in Dallas were apparently satisfactory, for a major development came about 3 weeks later. On 15th August, the North American plant in Inglewood, California delivered its last AT-6, and the Dallas factory took full responsibility for producing the aircraft for the United States military. In less than a year, the North American plant had gone from being approved through construction and into production. Now, after 4 months of operation, the factory was the sole source for the essential AT-6 trainer. On the first day of September, the plant reached another milestone, completing the first aircraft assembled totally out of parts fabricated in-house. Initial planes had utilized components supplied by Inglewood, California, but from September forward, the Dallas factory was self-sufficient. Sunday, 23rd November, brought another achievement. In what was the single largest delivery to date in Dallas, 50 trainers were turned over to the military. I'm pretty sure this picture apparently was taken the night before, best I can determine. It was 1 year since the first structural steel had been arrived at the plant site and less than 8 months since the first trainers had been delivered. The Texas Division of North American remained consistently and considerably ahead of contract schedule. But time was running out. 2 weeks later, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, and on 8th December, President Roosevelt spoke to Congress and the nation. In Dallas, North American workers gathered around radios to listen. The atmosphere was subdued, with one observer writing, quote, "Faces simply became a trifle grimmer, more set in determined lines," end quote. Some employees had personal stakes in the news from the Pacific. Cora Moore had her brother-in-law stationed at Hickam Field in Honolulu. Doris Sandlin had relatives in the Philippines near Manila in what was now a war zone. That unnamed employee simply said, quote, "Now we know what we have to do." By the time the day shift went home, the United States was officially at war with Japan. The next day, the Dallas Morning News approached local defense industries to inquire about their status. A diesel engine factory in Garland was still under construction, but it was hoped the production could begin in February. Managers of the 7 aircraft company anticipated going to a 24/7 schedule, with plans to double the workforce. Officials at North American, however, offered no grand statement or details regarding specific plans. Their answer was short and to the point. We're going to build more airplanes. And that's what they did. I'll run through some pictures real quick of after Pearl Harbor. All right. They built a second plant next door to the first plant to build the B-24 Liberator. They start building the P-51 Mustang, one of the most famous aircraft of war. And here's the production legacy. All right. So North American Aviation, if you count flyaway units, was the most prolific aircraft manufacturer during World War II. Now, there's two ways you can rate it by airframe tonnage, in which case Boeing is higher up because they built bombers, okay? I think Boeing and Douglas, if you go by tonnage, are a little higher than North American. If you talk flyaway units, North American is the largest manufacturer. And you'll see of their 3 plants, the Dallas was the most, contributed the most, 18,784 aircraft. All right. By the way, there's a typo in this. I got this out of the official U.S. Army Green Book history. It says they built 299 E6s. I've never heard of a plane called an E6. There was, however, an F6, which is photo reconnaissance version of a Mustang. So even a government document will sometimes have mistakes. All right. So let's wrap this thing up to a rough end, maybe some time for questions. Takeaways. Dallas was the first expansion plant to go into operation, achieving sustained production prior to Pearl Harbor. Okay. Ranked in terms of airframes produced, North American, well, I already said that, so, okay. And as a cooperative venture between the government and the aviation industry, NAA Dallas provides a case study for how the United States mobilized industry for war. Okay. And if you'd like to know more, there's a book, which the museum has about 10 copies of. And so if you buy the book, I assume it goes to the museum and not to Susan personally. Doesn't go to me. All right. So if a week later you go, wow, I wish I bought that book, it's available at the usual online booksellers. Or if you think Amazon has too much money, you can get it for UNT Press. And there is a Kindle version. If your shelves are getting overloaded with books, there is an electronic version, which is available on Amazon, I think, for the Kindle. All right, so I have a question. Do we have time for some Q&A?
Yes, we do.
All right.
And we have a Susan has a microphone. She'll take it to you. So please ask questions.
And remember, I know stupid questions, only stupid students. That's a joke. That's a professor joke. Don't take it personally.
Exists where the plant used to be.
A pump burned to the ground about a year and a half ago. Yeah. It's right there. So I've been driven by it lately because A, I don't live on that side of town, and B, I think I would be so depressed because it was there until about 2 years ago. As the plant went on, it was closed at the end of World War II. North American had no contracts left. It was later taken over by Chance Vought. So those of you who've been around the Dallas area for a while probably remember it as being the Vought plant, or later Vought was merged into Ling Temco Vought, which operated the plant right up to the end of the Cold War. So if you've driven by the Vought plant, that's it.
I was just going to ask that because then they became
Yeah.
with different variations. And
It is, Temco is the Texas Engineering and Manufacturing Company, which was created by some ex-North American Aviation executives to take advantage of the trained labor pool in the area. And so Temco had leased part of the plant from the government. Chance Vought moved into the other half of, because remember, there's actually 2 plants. So Chance Vought had moved into the other half of the plant. And eventually they were all merged together into Ling Temco Vought, more commonly remembered as LTV. Yeah.
When and how did all this production given over to the Northwest of Seattle and Northern California?
Could you paraphrase the question?
How did a lot of the airplane production then end up moving to the north?
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay. Well, and this is in the Lyon report when Roosevelt tells Harry Hopkins to look into the plant production thing. Most of the aviation industry, a lot of it was concentrated on the coasts. So like on the West Coast, you had Boeing up in Washington, okay, near Seattle. But down in Southern California, you had Consolidated in San Diego, North American in Inglewood, Douglas, Lockheed, because there's like, I think Vultee, there's 4 or 5 major manufacturers in Southern California. Okay, so the problem is it's right close next to the coast, so it could be vulnerable to attack by, for instance, aircraft carriers. Plus, the Volvat aviation industry concentrated right there. I mean, there's only so many people trained to do this kind of work. Then there was, out on the East Coast, you had Grumman, okay, and Martin, and some other manufacturers. So when they were looking to expand, what they wanted to do was disperse the industry. So if you put the plant in Dallas, Texas, it's far enough inland that you don't have to worry about an aircraft carrier attack, okay? But there's actually a list of parameters. You needed, electricity, where Mountain Creek Generating Station is there right next to the plant site. You need a railroad to bring in heavy machinery, you need a road for workers to travel, and you need an available, workforce. So they actually had a list of 10 or 11 or 12. They picked out spots that were potential spots. And of course, Consolidated ended up over in Fort Worth building the B-24, which is the plant that now makes the F-35.
The workforce that it was in Dallas, how many shifts did they work?
Oh, they were due.
Male and female.
Yeah, they were due. It'd be 24/7. Yeah. Now later, when they started running into some problems, I think later in the war they shifted to a different shifting where they have more supervision. So I think they started closing maybe on Sundays. I don't remember now. It's been a while since I read that. But they eventually redid the shifts to where there could be more supervisory people on hand. At this plant, about a third of the workforce was women. Okay, so one thing historians do sometimes like to skewer sacred cows. Okay, or put them on the grill. So it's Rosie the Riveter, the women made everything. And certainly the Rosie the Riveter story is true. And there's, very important thing, but it's not like you don't go into the plant and there's nothing but women, okay? And some plants, I think it was higher, some of the shipyards, I think, had higher than that. But at this particular plant, about a third of it was female. But a lot of that's in administrative functions too. There's huge administrative. Remember, this is a pre-computer age, so you've got time clocks and personnel clerks, and so a lot of that workforce probably was women. But there were women working at the plant. There's pictures of them in the book. I had quite a few of them. No problem.
There's more than women working there. I was really surprised to find out. A friend of mine, it was Sandy Berger, who was passed away. Her mom was the executive with North American. And from the plant there in Great Prairie, Dallas. And she was about 4'11", and very small. And she traveled always with her secretary. And of course, most people thought they were both secretaries.
That's interesting. Yeah, North America had 3 plants. They had one in California, one in Kansas. Or was it Missouri? It was Kansas City. I figured out which Kansas City was in. Kansas City, Kansas, I think, of course, Dallas. So there was a lot of travel by the executives between the different plants.
Admiral Richardson was fired because he said, he told FDR that they were producing machinery faster than they were producing personnel to run. Did this plant produce anything from the Navy?
The trainers. The T6 trainer, of course, is the SNJ for the Navy.
By the way, there are still 2 T6s flying around Paris, Texas, and you can feel them if you're mowing.
Yeah, there's the reason the T6 trainer is called the Tucson is because they were built in Texas.
No, it just is. I was gonna say, as a military brat, my dad flew AT-6s early in his career, and he always referred to them as AT Texas. And now I understand why they refer to it as Texas, because of their manufacturing.
Right. I think that came January of '43, if I recall. They originally were just called the T6. The A stands for Advanced, so it's Advanced Trainer 6, and they started calling the Texan, I think, in January '43, if I recall.
Where were these planes ferried to? Tell us.
Would have been all over, you know. The Air Force did a lot of course, at the time, the Army Air Force did a lot of training down at the San Antonio area. So I'm sure a lot of them went to San Antonio, but it would have gone, I mean, anywhere where there's flight training. The Navy did flight training, I think, in Corpus Christi and Pensacola, if I recall. Probably some other places I don't know off the top of my head.
You know, one of the things interesting to me that I'm reading in that Arsenal of Democracy book is Henry Ford was on a crusade for freedom, not war. And he was having a real struggle with setting up Willow Run and all that. And of course, he gave it to Hetzel to take over. So
Yeah, I think that was Edsel's project, a lot of that. There's a book about Willow Run. It's called, I don't know, it's planning the home front, building bombers and communities at Willow Run. It's written by a woman whose name I don't recall right off the top of my head, whose degree was in urban planning. So she largely focused in the book on what happens when you drop this giant aircraft factory in the middle of nowhere. You know, right. But she does spend some time talking about the building of a plant. And that's probably the most famous example of industrial mobilization. You know.
thank you very much. Great job.
Thank you. Thank you for your job.
We should turn it off before we go pushing all the buttons. Set the switch. All right.
Thank you.
And there is the remote. And I'm going to hang around in the exhibit hall afterwards. So if you think of a question later, which often happens, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Thank you. Great job. At this time, we'll have a moment of silence for Terry Murphy, Audie Murphy's son. He was born on April 14th, 1952. He sadly passed away February 13th, 2025. He was the last surviving child of Audie and Pamela Murphy. Let's have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. I'm going to do a shameless advertisement here that we want to share with you. We have put together a World War II roundtable. I think we're the only one in Texas, Susan. Is that correct? It's a bit of information about it. It's a 501c3 nonprofit organization that was founded March of 2023 by several of us citizens here in Hunt County in Northeast Texas. Their mission is to present 5 lectures a year by historians on military, political, or human aspects of World War II conflict to those whose relatives served in the war, who have an avocational interest in the conflict, who wish to understand the sacrifices that were made by the citizens of the United States, and to preserve democratic freedoms throughout the world. Their theme for 2025 is Peace at Last, Events That Made It Happen. I may be mixing up that with something else here in a minute. But to finish this up, we have these flyers on the table out front where you registered. Feel free to take one. Our next presenter, well, one is today, actually, that I'm going to introduce momentarily. The next one is July 24th, Margaret Mills Kincannon. Chenault's experiment in the Chinese-American military cooperation. Her father served with Claire Chenault over in the China-Burma India Theater. And then actually on October 23rd, we have another nationally known, internationally known, both these gentlemen, John Parshall, that will be coming on October 23rd. So take one of these brochures and join our group and come attend with us if you can, please. All right, I have the pleasure and honor of introducing the next speaker. I'll read the script in a minute, but it reminds me of like Tom Cruise in Hollywood. This is the guy on. He has a podcast. It's the best I've ever seen. So this is the Tom Cruise podcast, and it's yeah. I mean, you wait. I don't know if he'll speak as well here today as he does on that podcast, but it's unbelievably wonderful. Okay. He is a deputy director of Mississippi Armed Forces Museum at Camp Shelby. Prior to that, he was a staff historian at the National World War II Museum for 15 years. Currently, he also co-hosts the popular podcast, and it's amazing, Unauthorized History of the Pacific War During World War II. Special thank you. I want to give David King and George Alexander for helping pick up our speaker and work with him while he's here in our community. Also, the Roundtable, the Audie Murphy chapter for getting in contact with Seth and arranging for him to be able to come down. I think many World War II historians plan to be home every Tuesday when a new episode drops. That's when they drop. His presentation will be The Drive to Victory, Nimitz Central Pacific Drive, and the Defeat of Japan. Please join me in welcoming Seth Pardone, sir. If you need the mic, you and that. Do you need another mic, probably?
Say again?
Do you move around?
I don't move around. I stand still. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you want the other mic? Is it better? Yes, no?
Can you guys in the back hear me? I got a pretty big mouth.
Yes or no?
Yeah? Okay. You sure? Good. No, I'm just kidding. Do you need the mic or no? No? All right, good. All right, so thank you all for having me here. My name's Seth Pardone. I'm a historian and deputy director of the Mississippi Armed Forces Museum, as was said. And a buddy of mine and I decided to start a podcast about 3 years ago, and thinking that it wouldn't take off. And well, about 12 million people later, it has. So here I am. So I'm sorry if I bore you, but this is what it is. I'm not going to do a PowerPoint because, as I like to say, I'm a historian, trained historian. I just get paid to run my mouth. So here we go. So anyway, if you know anything about the Pacific War, there were two drives across the Pacific in World War II. One was led by General Douglas MacArthur through the Southwest Pacific, through the Solomons, up through New Guinea, not necessarily in that order, into the Philippines, and then that was General Doug's personal crusade, was to get back to the Philippines that he lost in 41 to 42. But the real drive that won the Pacific War, and I'm not taking anything away from Mac or anything that he did, but the real drive that won the Pacific War was orchestrated by a Texan, a gentleman from the little small dirt farm town of Fredericksburg, Texas, named Admiral Chester Nimitz. So, the theory is that the quickest way between point A and point B is a straight line. And that's pretty much how the Central Pacific Drive began. And it started very, very early in the United States' career, in the 1920s, actually. And I'll get to that in a minute. But it had to start somewhere. So we're going to start kind of at the beginning, if you will. So bear with me. I don't generally wing things. I'm going to read from a script too. So again, try to keep your eyes open if you can. So as the LVTs approached the shore, the naval bombardment began to cease. The thunderous roar had reigned over the Marines' heads from the time they embarked in their landing craft until now, some 1,000 yards from the shore. The bombardment had been absolutely tremendous. It was unlike anything that any of them had ever witnessed. The U.S. Navy had flexed its gunfire muscle tenfold, with battleships, cruisers, destroyers, and everything in between pouring gunfire into the small island. A veteran reporter said, and I quote, "Destroyers with many 5-inch guns firing almost as fast as a machine gun. The sky at times was almost brighter than noontime on the equator." Unquote. Following the airstrike by the Navy's carrier planes, the bombardment opened up again. The reporter witnessing the spectacle wrote, quote, "Surely we all thought no mortal man could live through such destroying power," end quote. The fire coming from the enemy shore seemed to prove that very point, as it was light, inaccurate, and sporadic. The 42 LVTs, those are landing vehicle tracked, of the first wave of invaders carried 20 men each. 100 yards behind them was another wave of 24, followed by 100 yards astern, another wave, and another, and another, and another. It was thought that the invaders riding in the LVTs would churn over the reef, over the coral reef, force their way inland, secure a beachhead, and with the succeeding waves secure the island in less than 48 hours. The enemy fire was still wild and inaccurate. Occasionally a mortar would burst in the sea around the LVTs, but it was few and far between. The closer the LVTs got to shore, however, that began to change. As the LVTs drew close in, the enemy fire increased almost instantly in ferocity and intensity, like someone flipping a light switch. At the beach codenamed Red 1, Captain Wendell Crane and his men from K Company 3rd Battalion 2nd Marines watched as the beach drew closer. All of a sudden, as he said, quote, and they all say this, hell broke loose, unquote. His Amtrak, which is what they called the LVTs, was getting hit from all sides as he watched, as bodies began to slump and his men began to fall inside the track. The fire was intense. The Amtrak next to Crane exploded in a fiery flash, with men being flung out of the vehicle as if they were dolls. Amidst the chaos, he recalled yelling, "Get the hell out of here fast." His men scrambled over the sides. Most were cut down by vicious machine gun fire coming from both flanks. Many men never even made it to shore. The LVTs began to collide with one another amidst the chaos, rapidly drawing most of the Japanese fire. Those who could got out as fast as they could, and then found themselves in literally a beehive of gunfire. One Marine, John Leopold, said the tracers and bullets cracked through the air so fast it sounded like popcorn. The tracers crisscrossed, and the whole area was a pattern of thin red lines of flame. We swore everyone on that beach was dead. We thought no one was alive. We couldn't see how they got in. I doubted that no more than 300 were still alive then. The beach, named Red 1, was red with blood, unquote. Others described the scene as a kaleidoscope of destruction. Flames from body-draped Amtraks that blazed out of control surrounded me, unquote. Marines crawled out of the vehicles on fire and slowly died in the water they sought to extinguish their flames. It was an absolute nightmare. Initial radio messages back to Colonel David M. Shoup from Red 1 were discouraging, to say the least. Quote, "Have landed, unusually heavy opposition, casualties 70%, can't hold," unquote. The messenger was not far off the mark. As the Marines clung to about 20 yards of Baishio's shoreline, many of them wondered why in the hell they were there. What was so important about this tiny speck of coral in the Tarawa Atoll that brought them to this very spot at this time in history? They'd been told that the plans for what the Navy called Operation Galvanic had been drawn up in Pearl Harbor months before, and to a point that was correct. But in reality, the real reason that the Marines and Navy corpsmen were on those blood-stained shores traced its roots over decades, not months. Born in 1911, not 1943, War Plan Orange, as the Navy called it, was the de facto plan should the United States have to fight a war against Japan. War Plan Orange, which was formally adopted by the Joint Army and Navy Board in 1924, allowed for the war in the Pacific to be prosecuted by the United States alone. Following the war games and fleet problems in 1933, in which the Pacific Fleet was destroyed, quote unquote, War Plan Orange was then revised to implement a different strategy. The original plan still assumed losing several Western Pacific outposts to the Japanese, but the U.S. plan now focused on the U.S. fleet based in Pearl Harbor, slowly, methodically taking Japanese island outpost after outpost. It was one of my personal heroes, Admiral Ernest J. King, Chief of Naval Operations and for all intents and purposes, the god of the U.S. Pacific war planning, who stressed the advance across the Central Pacific to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Through his, essentially begging, the JCS begrudgingly approved the limited buildup in the Pacific, seeing as how the proposed Normandy invasion had been postponed until 1944. JCS granted King permission to build forces and launch a Central Pacific Drive, which is what it was called in 1943, within a limited time frame, that being late 43, early 44. Without actually saying it, but heavily implying it, the JCS alluded to the fact that King's offensive had better show gains damn early in the process, or the limited forces allocated to him in his Pacific Project, as they called it, would be yanked and sent back to Europe. An tremendous amount rode on the success of this upcoming operation. Succeed in the Navy's amphibious doctrine and the plans laid down in War Plan Orange of how the United States would prosecute a war against Japan would be proven worthy and would dictate the remainder of the planned offensives in the war. fail, and the Navy would sit at square one with few backups and little confidence in their suggestions going forward. Fail, and future amphibious assaults, such as those being planned in Europe for places like Anzio and Normandy, would all have to be rewritten, and as a result would possibly put the liberation of mainland Europe off by another year or more. This inaugural operation of what would eventually be called the Central Pacific Drive would be vastly different than anything thus far undertaken in the Pacific. It would be the first assault against a heavily fortified beach, the first assault on a coral atoll, the first assault since Guadalcanal without the benefit of land-based aerial umbrella, and the first assault utilizing self-sustaining, large-scale amphibious expeditionary units. The campaign in the Gilberts, with the goal of capturing Tarawa Atoll, specifically Basio, would be named Operation Galvanic, and its success would dictate, or failure, would dictate the prosecution of the remainder of the war in both the Pacific and Europe. No pressure here, no pressure at all. Executing Galvanic and all further operations that would transpire across the breadth of the broad blue Pacific was, as I said, Fredericksburg, Texas native Chester W. Nimitz. Nimitz knew that the weight of the world was on his shoulders, and to execute the mission assigned would take both ingenuity and a whole lot of stuff, as my cohort talked about here just a minute ago. The U.S. had been slowly building its arsenal of democracy since 1938, not 1941, as the legend says, but it wasn't until after Pearl Harbor that the arsenal kicked into really, really high gear. And still, as we talked about the last couple of days, making all that stuff takes time. It doesn't just come out. 1942, and for the most part 1943, was fought on a shoestring budget. And to top that off, the Pacific was getting significantly less than the European theater, like 60% less material. And if that wasn't enough, Nimitz had to hand fight with one General Douglas MacArthur for every little single thing that came out of the West Coast and went into the Pacific theater. Nimitz also knew that the cost to capture Basio would be high in terms of lives. How high, he had no idea. After 76 hours of the bloodiest combat yet fought by the Marines or yet seen by American eyes, you got to remember this is November 1943, Tarawa was mercifully over. The casualties on both sides were absolutely shocking. The Americans suffered over 3,400 casualties. Among those, over 1,000 were fatalities. The numbers don't actually tell the story, though. The Marines lost a similar amount at Guadalcanal, yet that campaign was 6 months long. Tarawa was 76 hours long. The sheer number of casualties in such a short amount of time was, and still is, rather mind-boggling. Of the 4,600 Japanese defenders on the island, 17 were taken prisoner of war. Every other one was dead at their own hands or by the hands of United States Marines. Once news broke in the United States of the casualties suffered on Tarawa, the public reaction was, shall we say, appalling. Newspapers blasted the headlines of heavy casualties all across the country, with many questioning why such a small island, seemingly in the middle of nowhere, could cost the amount of lives that it did. Many questioned the necessity of taking Tarawa, but as I've said 100 times before, there had to be a Tarawa. The drive to victory had to start somewhere. Lessons had to be learned. We needed to know what worked, what didn't work, what to improve, and what to throw away. The testing ground of battle is the hardest test of all, but one that is absolutely necessary for a nation committed to a certain way of fighting a war. An amphibious invasion was that way for the United States Navy in the Pacific in World War II. The Navy's shore bombardment for Tarawa, the heaviest of the war to that point, was an abject failure. Nimitz knew that and learned from it. Remarking on the stoutness of the defenses, Nimitz ordered that naval architects and engineers make drawings of Basio's defenses, and then he ordered them to build those very same defenses on the Hawaiian island of Kaho'olawe. And then what he did is he started a naval shore bombardment school. Any ship that was going to take part in naval shore bombardment for the remainder of the war had to essentially qualify at Kaho'olawe before they were allowed to fire one round onto an enemy beachhead during the Pacific War. The Navy also conducted some sort of the Navy also concluded that they needed to form some sort of demolition team that had to deal with the coral reefs that they knew they were going to encounter again as they made their way across the Pacific. To that end, Naval Underwater Demolition Teams, better known as UDTs, were formed. These teams, forerunners to the SEALs of today, actually they were the SEALs of that day, and called frogmen back in World War II, would destroy the reefs that blocked invasion routes, gain intelligence on tides, enemy positions, and the like. These lessons, and many, 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 many more, were put to the test in the next operation, Operation Flintlock, the invasion of the Marshall Islands. Knowing that his fast carriers could provide enough air cover for the invasion, Nimitz decided to strike early for the archipelago. Originally slated for the summer of '44, Nimitz moved the timetable up to February, seizing on the intelligence he had been given, stating that the main targets of Kwajalein, Eniwetok, and most prized of all, Majuro, were defended lightly. Applying the lessons learned at Tarawa, Kwajalein and neighboring islands received a beating of biblical proportions in the weeks leading up to the landings. From January 29th to February 11th, 1944, in support of Flintlock alone, the fast carriers flew 6,232 sorties, 4,021 of which were over the target, dropping over 1,156.6 tons of bombs and munitions of varying types on 2 islands. And that was just the aircraft carriers. When the landings began, the U.S. Navy's warships pummeled the Japanese, with the culmination being on D-Day, and this is just awesome, when the battleship USS Mississippi pulled to within 1,500 yards off the shore of Kwajalein and began pumping 14-inch armor-piercing rounds into the island's defenses while simultaneously taking Japanese rifle fire. They were that close in. The Marshall's campaign was an enormous success for the Americans. Casualties, while always regrettable, were incredibly light compared to that in recent memory at Basio. The Marshalls proved to be a good testing ground for the lessons learned at Basio. LVTs played an enormous part in the action and would for the remainder of the war, delivering 98% of soldiers and Marines on every single Pacific island for the remainder of the war. The naval bombardment of the target islands was absolutely fantastic and awesome to see, and when compared to Basio. The Americans also overwhelmed their opponents ashore. At Basio, the Marines only enjoyed a 1.6 to 1 ratio against the defenders. In the Marshalls, they enjoyed a 6 to 1 ratio, and they would do that continually throughout the remainder of the war. American planners learned the hard way, unfortunately, that the invaders always had to have an overwhelming superiority in numbers to have a greater and almost definite chance to succeed. The strategic results were very, very hard to ignore. The outer ring of Japanese defenses had been beaten down and broken into. The U.S. Navy, and Chester Nimitz specifically, was learning how to win this war. As the war progressed through the winter of 1944, objectives and strategic goals changed and grew more clear. A naval blockade of Japan was still on the table. That's what the Navy always wanted to do. They never wanted to invade Japan, as per the original plan. But now American air power, specifically Boeing B-29 Superfortresses, became a major planning factor. The bomber, with its high altitude ability and high bomb load capacity, had the ability to bring Japan to her knees, or at the very least help significantly. The B-29s had to have a base from which to fly, several bases actually, and those bases were smack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There's a little archipelago out there called the Marianas. To their east lie the Gilberts, to the west of the Marianas lie the Philippines, to the north lies Iwo Jima. Literally in the middle of the road, so to speak, the Mariana Islands were extremely strategic for the United States, lying only 1,500 miles from Tokyo, well within the range of the Boeing B-29. Army Air Forces General Hap Arnold coveted the Marianas, as did Ernest King, as did the Japanese. Both knew full well that an invasion would be an absolute bloodbath, but it was unavoidable. The Japanese, as I said, also valued the Marianas, colonizing the area for the last 30 years. The Japanese considered the Marianas, especially Saipan, to be Japanese mandate, part of Japan. Loss of homeland-esque prestige was one thing, but loss of strategic initiative and defensive posture was a completely different thing altogether. If Japan lost the Marianas, their position in the war would lose significant ground and would effectively cut off their holdings in everything south, which included the Philippines. For the Americans...
Turn it up. I'm so sorry.
That's all right. I need some water anyway. It's a good time.
We'll get you what?
I'm good. I'm good. What you don't know is we planned that, actually. So, by the time of Operation Forager, Nimitz and his band of trusted subordinates had the whole amphibious invasion thing down to an absolute fine science. By June 1944, the United States Navy in the Pacific was the strongest, largest, most lethal seagoing force in the history of mankind, and that is not even open for discussion. Under the overall command of Admiral Raymond Spruance, 5th Fleet with Vice Admiral Mark Mitcher's mighty Task Force 58 would be the muscle for Forager and everything else after that. Mitcher's incredible force sported an eye-popping, and it varied at times, but more often than not, 15 aircraft carriers that would be divided into 4 task groups within the massive Task Force 58. Some of the ships included in the force were carriers the likes of Hornet, Yorktown, Lexington, Bellawood, Bunker Hill, Franklin, Wasp, Enterprise, Cabot, and Essex, among others. 20 cruisers, both heavy and light. Admiral Willis Lee, who's the ultimate badass. His battle line, which consisted of Washington, North Carolina, Iowa, New Jersey, Alabama, Massachusetts, South Dakota, and Indiana. And that's not even mentioning the vast array of over 60 destroyers. Such was the confidence in the power of Task Force 58 that the Navy, who had before dictated invasions based on the availability of land-based air for protection of the fleet against counterattack, now simply ignored that fact that there would be no land-based air that could possibly support Forager. The power of Mitcher's carriers alone and the power of the warships that surrounded the flat tops gave Spruance all the assurance that he needed, that he could protect both the landing beaches and fight the Imperial Japanese Navy at the same time. As Nimitz's massive force sailed forth to do battle against the Japanese in the Marianas, one carrier pilot aloft noted, and I quote, "The wakes from all those ships were perfectly symmetrical with each other, like a perfect ballet. I looked down on all this power and wondered what kinds of fools these Japanese were. They had made one of the greatest miscalculations of all time, and boy, were they going to pay the price," unquote. An almost unimaginable 600 ships would take part in Forager. Over 300,000 men rode in those ships. That's just the landing force, by the way, of which 127,000 were assault troops, consisting of the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Marine Divisions, as well as the United States Army's 27th and 77th Infantry Division. By far, this was the largest and most complex operation yet undertaken in the Pacific. The force bearing down on the Marianas was absolutely unstoppable. The campaign that followed spanned 3 major islands, Saipan, Tinian, and Guam, and began on June 15th and concluded on the 10th of August, 1944. There were over 24,000 American casualties, with those being killed in action numbering over 5,000. Japanese casualties are estimated to be north of 50,000 souls. The capture of the Marianas was an absolute backbreaker for the Japanese. Not only did the Imperial Navy suffer an absolutely crushing defeat at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, which was the largest carrier battle in history, at the hands of Spruance's 5th Fleet and Mitcher's Task Force 58, the loss of the islands, as I said earlier, put the home islands of Japan directly in the crosshairs of the Boeing B-29. And the Japanese knew it. They knew about the B-29. They knew that they were now literally under the gun. To this point, every step in the war taken by Nimitz had been to get American air power within range of Japan, and that is exactly what had happened here. The theory was that the American air power, B-29s bombing Japan, would eventually bring Japan down to the point where she couldn't make any more materiel, she couldn't move any more troops, and it would wither the morale of the people down, hopefully allowing the Japanese people to sue for peace, even if the government didn't want it. With the loss of the Marianas, those in the know in Japan knew that the war was over. They knew that there was no way that they could possibly win World War II against the United States, yet they still fought on. As 1944 waned and 1945 came into view, the situation in the Pacific and the ultimate problem of having to invade Japan also came into view. General Curtis LeMay's B-29s were bombing Japan with more regularity by January of that year, and as the strategic bombing campaign continued, it became clear that an emergency landing base, which would also act as a fighter base, closer to Japan was needed. The island of Iwo Jima fit that bill, and on February 19, 1945, Nimitz's Central Pacific Drive hit the black sands of that volcanic island and proceeded to fight the bloodiest battle in the history of the United States Marines. The fact that after 36 days of almost non-stop combat, and I do mean 24 hours a day, The invaders, those being the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions, had suffered more casualties than the defenders, the only time in the entire war in the Pacific that occurred. It was an ominous sign for future operations. Despite the fact that heroism was around every corner of that tiny volcanic island, the 27 Medals of Honor awarded for action on Iwo Jima prove that beyond any doubt. The Marines suffered some 26,000 casualties on Iwo Jima alone. After the battle was over, the Army Air Forces did have their emergency strip in their fighter base, but it was at a very, very high cost. Despite being on Japan's doorstep, the empire continued to resist. An invasion of Japan looked like all but an absolute certainty. Okinawa was the next, and it would be the final target for Nimitz's drive, as both Nimitz and General Mack began to prepare for the invasion of Japan. After nearly 3 months of the most vicious and violent combat yet seen in the entire war, and just keep those numbers in mind that I said before, 26,000 Marines on Iwo Jima, and yet this is the worst one of them all. Some 50,000 Americans were casualties during the campaign for Okinawa, of which more than 12,000 were buried ashore on Okinawa or buried at sea by the United States Navy. Over 200,000 Japanese lost their lives on Okinawa, 100,000 of which, over about 104,000, were civilians, laid dead all across the huge island. If Iwo Jima was seen as a harbinger of things to come, Okinawa and the ferocious fighting and bloody slow slog up the island, or down the island actually, was seen as a writing on the wall for what the invasion of Japan, Kyushu specifically, would bring. Nimitz and his staff began planning for Operation Olympic, the invasion of Kyushu, which was set for November 1945, but were stopped in their tracks by 2 nuclear explosions over Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August of 1945. The 2 nuclear weapons that were delivered to those 2 cities flew from the same island, Tinian, which had been captured by Nimitz's Central Pacific Drive in June of the previous year. By August 1945, the United States stood at Japan's very doorstep, poised to invade, but desperately hoping to God not have to do so. The United States and Chester Nimitz had blazed a trail to victory in the most efficient and timely manner. All thanks to Admiral Nimitz, his subordinates, and most obviously the men doing all the fighting and the dying. The Central Pacific Drive, led by the Texas native, was the reason that by 1945 the Japanese Empire was bereft of oil, her supply lines had been cut, and her people were teetering on the brink of starvation. The Central Pacific Drive, led by Chester Nimitz, was the reason that the United States Navy sailed freely up and down the coast of Japan by the summer of 1945, and the Central Pacific Drive was unquestionably the reason that the United States was able to deploy those B-29s that brought the war to an end. I'll be more than happy to take any questions if you got it.
Would you finish in briefly the
Arc flight by the code breakers.
No. No, I won't. No, I'm just kidding. No, so I'm assuming you're referring to the Navajo code breakers. I'm sorry. That Navy, the cryptanalyst? Oh, yeah. Okay, my bad. Sorry. Code talkers. Sorry. No, the Navy cryptanalysts played an enormous role throughout the war, but especially in the beginning of the war. You're referring to Station Hypo in Pearl Harbor and Station Fromell in Australia, that was staffed by United States Navy and Army and Australians. They were they were analyzing Japanese traffic, radio traffic. It's called traffic analysis. They were not reading anybody's mail. That's a theory. That's a myth that they were, every third word. It's baloney. They were looking at, they get 25 messages at one time, and they'd try and decipher what was going on and piece, traffic patterns together to literally piece a puzzle together. It's like trying to look through a crime scene. Obviously, these guys gave us forewarning of the Japanese intentions in their Battle of Coral Sea. And then, of course, obviously the big one is Midway. Without those guys, without the Station Hypo specifically, at the time he was commander, Joseph Rochefort and his team, we would not have been able to set the ambush that we did on June 4th, 1942 at the Battle of Midway, where we sunk 4 Japanese carriers. and with the loss of the Yorktown. And of course, these guys played an important role throughout. The Japanese did change their code after Midway. They got to the point where they were changing it about every 6 weeks. And it took the code breakers at that point, specifically Station Frumell, a lot longer to be able to decipher the Japanese information. That's why through Guadalcanal, from August through really like February of 43, there was very little code breaking because we couldn't read their mail. They were changing it so fast that we were having trouble keeping up. Eventually we did keep up, and the Japanese, for whatever reason, decided to stop changing their codes, and it got to the point where in 1940, late 43, early 44, we quite literally were reading their mail. We knew exactly what admiral was going to what base. That's why Yamamoto got shot down and killed. We knew, when somebody went and had sushi that night. I mean, it was ridiculous. I mean, we knew everything that was going on. By the end of the war, there was nothing that could get by. We knew that they were deliberating about surrender before they knew that they were deliberating about surrender. Anybody else?
Did you ever have a chance to meet Captain Jerry Yellen or have read this book, Last Night of Firing?
Yes, ma'am.
This was the very last flight
Last mission.
Iwo Jima, yes, ma'am. He was, I can't remember the fighter squadron that he was part of. He flew 51s. He flew P-51s and what was called VLR, Very Long Range Patrols. They left Iwo Jima, and they would occasionally escort B-29s, but not very often. They were kind of going like they were doing in Europe, doing hunter-killer operations. If it moved, they shot it. And they were strafing trains and ox carts and dudes walking down the beach, and they're shooting down anything that happened to venture into the sky. Yes, I knew Mr. Yellen. Anybody else?
The Nimitz served our carrier the whole.
Nimitz? Nimitz never went to war. Nimitz never heard a shot fired in anger. From December 31st, 1941, was it December? Yeah. New Year's Eve, 1941, until, when did he go to Guam? 45. April? Till he moved to Guam, he was in Pearl Harbor. He never rode a carrier. I mean, he might have rode a carrier to get someplace, but more often than not, he never heard a shot fired in anger. Not one time. Sir? Yes, sir. Long time ago, but yes.
Was your representative Nimitz there? You were saying you were representing Nancy during war.
Yes, sir.
Wasn't it all right?
It's pretty damn accurate.
Hate to bring up Richardson again. But K.O. Richardson was one of the Texans that Coro FDR had to deal with. He had to deal with Garner, LBJ, Rager, and then Nimitz.
Mm-hmm.
So you had Phil Texas with that for a while, probably. But actually, can you imagine how big this thing was? They're all would converge on the UDO.
Yeah, I mean, we were
Reason over beer that they drank.
we were talking last night, and I said, on average there were 15 aircraft carriers alone, and Fifth Fleet, which it was called Fifth Fleet under Spruance, and it was called Third Fleet under Halsey. Same ships, same captains for the most part, different air groups on the carriers, but they changed command structure. And Halsey actually used to say that you referred to the ships as the horses, as like a team of horses, and he'd say that we always change the drivers, but the horses stay the same. And he was saying that with affection, saying that the sailors, these guys they're smoked, they're done. Majuro was the first big base outside of Pearl Harbor, and then Ulithi. As the fleet continued to move west, the logistic lines got longer and longer and longer, and it took longer to get stuff out to where it needed to be. The fleet needed time to gas up, replenish. The guys needed a beer break and a smoke, and Ulithi became that place after Majuro, when the war continued to move west. And then they moved into San Pedro Harbor in the Philippines at late war. But yeah, I mean, at any one time, there's a famous picture that they call it Murderer's Row. And it's just the carriers, a shot of these guys laying down there in Ulithi. And it's, I don't know, 8 or 10 carriers in a row, these big, massive Essex class, and in the background you can count 6 or 8 battleships, and it's just absolutely tremendous. There's no way that this country could produce that amount of ships and that amount of time today. It's not possible. There's no way.
By the way, Richardson wrote Orange.
I mean, it's part of that now. Yeah.
That in Richardson has something to do with all the rainbows. Top of that, it's worked for Richardson several times. I always wondered
I can't really answer that, but I mean, I do know that War Plan Orange, as I said, was like the basis for the entire Pacific Drive, and it's what the U.S. Navy had formulated as early as 1911, and they alter it. It altered throughout the war or before the war, and it was the boilerplate, if you will, on how to fight Japan. And I mean, if you read about what the original plan was, and you look at how the Pacific War was fought, there are a few, deviations here and there. But by and large, it's how we fought the war was with a 30-year-old plan with then modern technology. And I mean, I can't stress enough the sheer force, the power of that force. It's mind-boggling, the amount of material that went into that drive. It's unbelievable. I mean, you think of Normandy and you think, several thousand ships, and that's impressive, God knows. But, the distance between where those ships left England and Normandy ain't that far. But you look at the distance between Pearl Harbor and Saipan alone, that's over 3,400 miles. And they had to move, and even though we had bases closer to Saipan, the invasion force, Admiral Richmond Kelly Turner's Alligator Navy, left Pearl Harbor. They came from Pearl. That's 3,400 miles, moving 300,000 men and 600 vessels. That's a lot of beef.
We're gonna have our next program. We'll talk about Over the Hump, and it'll also emphasize between that.
Mm-hmm. That was an unsustainable thing. There's no way. The logistics train in China and India was absolutely impossible to sustain. It was hard enough to sustain it in the Marianas, much less humping it, quite literally, down Chinese mud roads with native labor. It wasn't never going to happen. Not with the B-29, the most finicky aircraft. The most expensive project, 4 times more expensive than Manhattan Project, was the B-29 alone. And to be able to maintain that, it had finicky engines. Damn thing would randomly catch fire. So, I mean, when things go bad, you got to have stuff to replace those parts that go bad. And they were having trouble keeping the tempo in the Marianas. So China and India, never going to happen.
Aluminum alley, those called when they.
Yeah, the hump, yeah.
Yeah. Will you please give us a briefing on your podcast and how many episodes and
A bunch. I don't know.
how do people access your podcast?
You can listen to it anywhere you receive your podcasts, Apple, iTunes, or whatever, or Spotify, or whatever, and all that jazz. We do a video version of it too. It's on YouTube. Just look up The Unauthorized History of the Pacific War. We're on there. If you watch YouTube, you get the pleasure, or displeasure rather, of looking at me and my guests that are on there all the time. My buddy John Parshall, who'll be here in a couple months, and author John Bruning, and my good buddy Rich Frank, and people like that, just friends of mine that I've known for years and years. So it's kind of a dudes club. We just hang out and shoot the breeze. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else?
I just said, we talked about the aircraft carriers and the support area. How many Higgins boats or landing craft do you think were involved in?
No idea. No idea. Couldn't tell you. I have no earthly clue.
Thank you again. Wow.
Zero.
That's a lot of information. Wow.
At this time, we'll have recognition of our veterans with the honor guard, please.
Or what?
Uh,
Put. Bill. This time we will do a honest labor branch of the military where we call out your branch if you are a middle at each stand. Or maybe stand, raise your hand. Ian who had a battle on the start.
Immense. Great ball. Amy. Pulsar. And Air 4.
This time we'll have a moment of silence for the POWs and LIers that cannot be here with us today. Thank you. Little bird. Right? Forward. Up. Oh, what up? Up.
We have two speakers here with us from the Audie Murphy Fort Sill Club that are going to speak to us briefly. Sergeant First Class Ortiz and Sergeant First Class Beatty are both members of the Fort Sill Audie Murphy Club. A special thank you goes out to the Gerald Washington, who was able to arrange for them to be with us today. They're going to tell us a bit about the history of the club and what they do and what it means to them to be a member of the club. I understand it's a very prestigious club to belong to. Then we will open it up for questions for them. Please join me in welcoming them at this time, please.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen and veterans. I am Sergeant Kayla Ortiz, and I am coming from Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I'm currently serving as a senior drill sergeant for 434 Field Artillery Brigade. Been there about 2 years, so these are my last weeks as a drill sergeant, which is very exciting. 2 days ago, I have no voice, so I'm glad that I'm able to talk right now. I want to say thank you to everyone for inviting us and having us here. This is a very special moment for us. I've been in the Army for 14 years. Most of the time, I've been working for the Navy. So back on 2022 is when I was able to join the club from Rheinland Falls in Germany. I'm part of the medical field, so I was part of the Rheinland Falls chapter. Now, I'll fall under the regular chapter in Oklahoma. And for me, it's an honor, right, to be part of the club, but also for me, how I see it, it's about earning trust, uplifting others, and carrying forward a tradition of service and sacrifice that does not end when the mission is over, right? For me, it's more than anything, it's like a promise, right? It's a promise to keep striving, to keep serving, and never forget the responsibility that comes with influence. I see that especially now that we have so many civilians, right, coming into the military. Very rare, I have one across that is 17 years old. We do have them, and they have a brave heart for sure, very resilient. So it also kind of emphasizes what Audie Murphy's done and the legacy that we still have in America.
Good morning, afternoon, everybody. Like she said, we just want to thank you guys for having us. Special thank you to Mr. Washington, who drove down to Fort Sill to pitch this to us in person. I'm Sergeant First Class Anthony Beatty. I'm currently serving at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I do know the sweetness of taking the hat off. Served 3 years as a drill sergeant. I've been done with that time for about a year now. I'm serving as an instructor within the 30th Air Defense Artillery Brigade there on Fort Sill. And I was actually inducted into the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club with the Red Lake chapter about 2 years ago now. So my whole experience of the club and everything it strives to be is from Fort Sill. So we're a smaller community. We do have a lot of members who are very, what's the word? Audie Murphy to us is a leader, and he emphasizes what it is to be not just a soldier in today's age, but back then, his fearlessness, his leadership abilities, the way he grew up, and the foundation of what he was is what members of the club now and soldiers like us in this day and age strive to be. So everybody knows the story of Audie when it comes to our club. It is a very prestigious award in the Army. We are the award itself that we get, as you see the medallion we wear across our chest, is dictated by the Army, so it's a prestigious process we have to go through. But the club that we represent and that we work with day in and day out as members is a nonprofit that is outside of the DoD, right? So we, as a club, get to dictate how it is that we come across as leaders, what it is that we do as a club to help support the communities and help do things for the people around us, similar to as what Audie would do back in his day. So I, as a member, being still so young in this club, have found great pride in being a great leader, serving those around me, my community, my family, my friends, and then getting to now experience stuff like this. Just spending 2 days with Mr. Washington has been amazing. and learning more about Audie than I have ever before, right, has just lit more of a fire in me to want to represent the Audie Murphy Club, and all of those of you who have all this vast knowledge of Audie Murphy and everything he's done inside the military, outside the military. Those who knew him personally, I understand. I just learned his oldest son passed away very recently. So being able to be a part of this, hopefully we're making it a tradition for the Fort Sill Audie Murphy Club to attend yearly with a bigger turnout would be outstanding. And it's something that we look forward to working on while we are still here in Fort Sill, to see if we can get a bigger turnout, more active duty military members, bringing the young generation in to help make sure that these events and stuff like this continue on and it doesn't fade away. I know, speaking of Mr. Washington, he said we used to have a lot larger of turnouts, but the thing that's going to save this is having younger generation and get more people involved and getting soldiers like us to kind of spread the word and get us out here. So again, thank you guys for having us. Thank you for allowing us to be here. And at this time, we're going to go ahead and open it up to questions for anybody that may have questions. We'll answer to the best of our ability.
Hey, I'm sorry.
Good. How's it going?
I'm good. I was if you help a signature or like that, it helped me more with traffic branch here or whatever.
No, awesome.
Thank you for going. I'll listen.
Of course, yeah. We are honored to be here.
How many members do you have right now? Yeah.
So currently serving, we have a list. So I'm going to be honest here. So the list that I have goes back 2 to 3 years now. So since coming into the club, I've taken over the treasurer position. So I've obviously keeping tabs on who all is in the club and whatnot. So we have about 150 names as active members in our club, but those may have PCS to other duty stations. So currently in our club, I think we have about 30 to 35 active members, but all in one time. Realistically, right now we got about like 10. But the group itself, we do have over like 150 that may or may not still be on Fort Sill. So that's something we're still working on getting those numbers accurate. Yes.
Can you go through a little bit of the process it takes to become a member?
Yes. So the process starts with being identified. Normally comes for like your character, present leadership, and then you are presented to be part of the board. So we'll go different levels. You have your brigade and so on. It's about 4 boards in total. Very stressful, very hectic, and you have to be in your best behavior to be actually considered, right? And after that, you go to a series of exercise, like doing a fitness test, doing your warrior task, going to the range, and it's expected from you to perform with expertise.
I know we have usually once a year the group that's going through it.
In the Dallas area region, they often come out to the museum. And one of my favorite parts is a lot of times at the balls at the end of the week, they'll tell them at the museum or in the parking lot which ones made it to the next steps. And it's been really cool to me to be able to see that.
That is very nice, yes.
And Times Foundation Week, why contact someone from Southern Buck, and I found out there's no one particular box. How is it decided, or did you not make which boards have is our son at the club, or do they all have it, or how does that work?
So the club as a whole, each duty station or each post has the ability, as long as there is a brigade or division entity, they have the ability to have a club on its own. So like for us, we have Fort Sill has the Red Lake chapter, and then we have the Victory chapter up at Fort Jackson and stuff like that. So all it takes is an active member to be assigned to that duty station to create the club. And then, so at Fort Sill, we have a council or a group of council members. We have a president. I myself am currently serving as the vice president. We have a treasurer. We have a PAO, just somebody who's out there to advertise and get his names out there. So if at any time you are looking to get in contact with anybody or any post that has a chapter for the Audie Murphy Club, now in today's day and age, Facebook is the best place. We do have websites. So I know for Fort Sill, we have the Fire Center of Excellence website. And then our page is on there. Oops, excuse me. And if you want to go on there, it'll put up our contact names for you to reach out. And then if for some reason you want to get in touch with other chapters or known locations of the Audie Murphy Club, because we do have the chapters all over the states, and again, Oconus or overseas, we have a few chapters as well. But if you would like to get information on that, you can reach out to any of us, and we can resource out and find out who's in charge of what chapters, and just kind of get you contact information for any of those at any given time.
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to mention to everybody that Don Moore, who was co-founder of the Sergeant Audie Murphy class, he was in the Marine Corps and in the Joy Yard after he was PI in Marines, and he was also, he still is, an excellent artist. I talked to him a couple of days ago, and he been battling cancer, so what everybody would say off for him. And he's also got Parkinson's disease, so he got shingles, so he's not been doing well. But he designed the medals that they're wearing, and the image on the medal was designed by Don.
And just something to touch on that as well. So we do have a chapter historian. He's Mr. George Keck. He's been with the Fort Sill. He's one of the actually founding members who, when the club was created in Fort Sill, who's a huge fan, I believe friend with Don Moore. And anytime we have our monthly meetings with our group and all of the other members, he loves bringing artwork signed by Don Moore or created by Don Moore. So my office is just covered with little pieces of artwork from Don Moore that our historian, Mr. Staff Sergeant Retired George Keck, is a fanatic about it, and he loves giving us that type of memorabilia. So that's awesome.
This question is for both of you.
Yes, sir.
Why did you choose to want to become a member of the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club?
You want to go? Let me go ahead. No, man. All right, well, I'll go first. All right. For me, like, it was very special to be in an Army post after being in the Army for like 11 years. Let's start there. But overall, I think like selfless service for me is the top one, right? Someone did it for me, and my duty is to pay back. So that's how I see Audie Murphy. There was always more, right? It's like there's always something else to do. There's always somebody to help, and there's somebody that always needs. So I feel like myself, if I'm put in the position where I've been blessed with having more, then my job is to give it back.
It's a great question, Mr. Washington. So the reason I wanted to be in the club, for those of you who don't know, so obviously Audie Murphy's highest enlisted rank was Staff Sergeant. So for the club itself, the way it's been inducted into the Army is as an NCO, once you get to that position, you are now eligible to go through this club. So coming up as a young soldier, growing up in the ranks, I had no idea what the club was, what it represented, who Audie Murphy was. Until I met an NCO who was actually now, again, currently our chapter president, First Sergeant Matthew Crane, who I had attended a board as a warrior, the best warrior competition board. I get to do, fun activities, physical stuff. That's always been something I liked. He came up to me afterwards and he told me, he's like, you would be a great candidate for the Sergeant Audie Murphy Club, and I would like to talk to you more about it. I had no idea what he was talking about. So once he gave that time, we had lunch together, and he spoke to me and let me know who Sergeant Audie Murphy was, and then what this club represented, and then finding out that what the club represented is how I was as a person, as a soldier growing up in the ranks already, and then there's like-minded people as myself that are doing this and are resembling greatness and leadership, fearlessness, physical capabilities, and then just being a helpful person to your community outside of the Army as well, for volunteering. It was all things that I was already doing, and then being a part of a club of people who are like-minded and are doing the same thing and striving not only to be excellent themselves, but to bring everybody else up and take care of the soldiers beneath them, the commanders above them, and everybody in between. It was just something clicked in my head. I have to be a part of this club. I have to learn more about this guy they call Audie Murphy and what he's done. The highest decorated war soldier in history. I want to strive to be like him. So from that first meeting and hearing about what this club was and what it represented and who Audie Murphy was outside of being a soldier, but as a person, I just knew this is something I have to be a part of. And now it is my job, being a member, to get that same fire built into other people and to get them to come and be a part of what we do and what Audie Murphy would be proud of.
Thanks, everyone.
Yes, sir.
But he is maybe an example of maybe some kind of activities the pub does to
Most definitely. So we are a nonprofit organization outside of the DoD. So within the Army, we have strict rules and guidelines of what we can and can't do. Obviously, this being one of them, being in uniform, we had to pass this through legal to make sure that we were good to go. But outside for the nonprofit portion, we do a lot of volunteer work and then like soldier like help and production. So we volunteer outside the Fort Sill Lawton community. We'll help at like veterans centers. Our historian, Mr. George Keck, he works at the VAs and what is the word I'm looking for? They call them the Moose Lodge, stuff like that. Yes, stuff like that. So we'll as members, we will go and do like manual labor. We will help. We'll do like annual food drives, clothing drives for the holidays, stuff like that. Help people in need. So a lot of our stuff outside of military is based on volunteer work in that aspect. And then through the military, with like our uniforms and stuff like that, we will go and represent as higher enlisted members for like leadership conferences and stuff like that. And just speaking on the importance of being a leader, the certain types of leadership, and things of that nature. You have any more to add to that? Nope. You got this on time.
And that there is a not a museum.
Some memorabilia there where you guys eat. Can you describe the things that are there?
Yeah, so most of the items that we have are coming from Mr. George. He's great, like he was mentioning before. But we do have like a sculpture that was given to the club. We have plenty of books, pictures, and just scripts that have information about very specific. Like here we were talking about, I said, like the family members, things that you can't really Google on the internet anymore. So Mr. George take cares of all that. He's our historian. So that's mainly what we have. It's a small room, very historic since the outside. It's all labeled and everything, so you can't really miss it if you go to that building.
And one of the things I'd like to point out that we have, it's again Mr. George Keck. He's our historian. His work that he has a uniform of Audie Murphy's that he's currently still gathering a few more medals for it to be the exact replica of what his uniform looked like before his end of service. So that's right there in the window of our door frame. So as a club, we have monthly meetings, and it is inside of our head building at headquarters there in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And then it is a little room designated strictly for the club, and it is everything Audie Murphy inside there, both military and non-military. So if you guys do ever visit Fort Sill, I think it'd be awesome for you guys to come and visit that. If you'd like to see it, we can definitely make that happen. But yes, I know you've told me that you've been there. And I don't know when you've been there last, but we have had some upgrades to it. So if you guys ever do pass by, I think you would love to come and check it out now.
So I used to be in the Army as well and Peace Market 1 I know they'll have your interpreting C or they that be part of or the
No, it's not part of it.
I was also guys. I like the EIP. As Spiritual said, you described the swing patterns. What exactly Jeremy's curious or get the works.
Yes, so there's different awards and markings you can get. This one here that we both have, right? It distincts based on the color of this emblem, right? Your expertise level. But all you do, you go with your partners and Germans, and then you go to the ranges. They have similar weapons to us, kind of the same system of like the M4 type of like M16, and the same as the pistol pistol 17 or M9 they used to be. So all you do, you go with them. They have laser system. Their weapons are kind of nice because it's a little bit easier, I would say. But once you go in there, right, you get evaluated by their military leadership. And it's a very simple event. It's all compiled one day because it's also compiled by small groups. So you will never see like a huge plateau. It's normally at 10, 15 people that will go attend. And then based on your scores on your weapon system is where you get qualified on the color. So this is silver. You have another higher one that will be gold. And then you have bronze, which is like the lowest level of expertise. Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I will say these aren't necessary to have, but again, like she spoke in the beginning, so to be inducted or even thought of for this club, you have to be selected. Specifically, you'll start with your first sergeant, your battery level, and then your battalion level has to go bless off on it, and then your brigade level, and then from there you'll go to the installation level board. Like she said, each one has a boarding process. So it's not necessary or mandatory that you have to have any type of credentials or what like that. But those, as you can see, like from us, we strive for excellence to do better and be better. And not everybody in the Army, some people will serve their country in their militaries and just do what they have to do. And then others do more than what they want or what they have to do, right? And they'll go above and beyond. And those are the type of leaders and NCOs or individuals that the club looks for. So anybody who's excelling, not only in their area, but like other areas as well, those are the ones that we're like, hey, you have something in you. We want you to come over here. And it's giving somebody the ability to show off what they've done and then now allow them to do that for others. So it's not recommended, but it does help you for definitely. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Great ambassadors for the Army and Audie Murphy. Next speaker, Kelly Schick. She is the senior historian at, listen, it's the National Medal of Honor Museum. Prior to this, she was research historian at the National World War II Museum for 7 years. She's going to give us some insight on this new great museum that we have locally. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So I'm really thrilled to be here because obviously we have a great connection to the Audie Murphy story. So just going to give you a little overview of our museum, how we're sharing these stories. So one thing that's important to know is we have our foundation, and within this we have kind of 3 parts. We have the museum that is in Arlington. Housed at the museum is our Griffin Institute for Leadership, and we are working on building a Medal of Honor monument in Washington, D.C. So that has been passed. We've been approved. We're now seeking to get approval to put it close to the Lincoln Memorial because of Lincoln's ties to the Medal of Honor. And that's an exciting ongoing project we have. But when visitors come to our museum in Arlington, you see it's beautiful. It's just off Interstate 30. Right here you can see Choctaw Stadium, Globe Life. So we're in a really wonderful spot. You can go to a Rangers game, go to a Cowboys game later this year. But we're very fortunate to be in the spot. And you see kind of this unique building. It's a big block sitting on top of 5 pillars. And that big square is to represent the burden that is the Medal of Honor, the weight of carrying the Medal of Honor. When visitors come in, one of the things we really love for them to see is our Ring of Valor. On that Ring of Valor is all 3,528 names, every Medal of Honor recipient. It's designed so that over time, as we maybe add to that number, we can add those names in here. And it's a way we can ensure that all recipients are in our museum. As you can imagine, it's impossible to tell 3,500 stories in one place, but we honor them all here with our Ring of Valor. And then as visitors go upstairs, we have this unique 360 theater that begins their journey into the Medal of Honor story. Those names are repeated there as a reminder of these are the stories you're going to hear. These are the people you're going to see. Give you a little sneak peek. It's a really beautiful 8-minute film that introduces you to what is the Medal of Honor? Who are the people who wear this medal, who have worn this medal? Why is their story so important that we're going to learn about it? We partnered with a wonderful company to put this together, and we're really proud of the story that we're telling to start your journey. You step out into our museum, it's a simpler space. It's wide open. Our stories are not grouped by decade or by conflict because we view the Medal of Honor as a collection of people. And we've put these stories together so that when you start your journey, you start with Audie Murphy. He's one of the first faces you're going to see, actually. But next to him is a young man, Clint Romeshay, who fought in Afghanistan in 2009. So we have these stories side by side because they're all connected by that medal that they wear. We have a lot of cool technology in the museum. We always say people want to see interesting ways to learn. People learn in different ways. We have 2 corners in which we have these 50-foot projections. And as you walk up to these projections, you see these little windows open and you can learn more about a Medal of Honor recipient. So we have these in different themes. We have battles. We have the Nuremberg ceremony in 1945 when in Zeppelin Field, 5 Medals of Honor were awarded in Germany's infamous Nazi stadium before the war's even over. Sometimes the medal is used as propaganda, but we want people to think about what that means for the recipients. Along the center wall, which is the outside of that theater, we have timelines where you can learn about how has the Medal of Honor changed? And when did it get started? What is it like today? How has awarding changed? How has the medal itself changed? What's the design? It doesn't look like it did in the 1860s. And then on this side, we have our story of triumphant valor that highlights the stories of those who waited decades for recognition. People like Edward Carter and Tibor Rubin. Big, fun, exciting artifacts. Everyone loves a Huey. So this is our Huey helicopter. It has been interpreted as a Nancy Lee, which was one of the helicopters flown by then Major Patrick Brady in Vietnam when he was performing dust-off operations as medical evacuation. And we have this wonderful corner here. In addition to the Huey, you can hear from other Medal of Honor recipients who flew in Hueys during the Vietnam War. Conversations, ordinary people, extraordinary lives. This is a chance for you to sit down and have a conversation with a Medal of Honor recipient. So over a course of several days, we filmed Medal of Honor recipients and asked them hundreds of questions. Like, where did you grow up? How did you earn the Medal of Honor? What does it mean to you to be a Medal of Honor recipient? What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? And you can sit down and have a conversation with them. And as you ask your question, the answer is recalled and you get to hear from them. We currently have 3 of these with 2 more coming later this year. It's a great chance for young people, all of us really, to sit down and kind of hear firsthand. So it's not a traditional oral history, but it's something that we are really excited to bring to people and have people experience. And then Dust Off, this is our virtual reality experience. So you get to go in, put on a VR headset, and in that headset, you get to be part of a Dust Off crew going on a mission inspired by General Brady. We've got a little quick glimpse into what that looks like. This was created for us by CAE. They do a lot of simulations for the government. If you've heard of the Link trainers, all the Apollo simulations, all of those things, they've done all of those things in the past, and they were generous enough to create this really great experience for us. But when we tell the Medal of Honor stories, one of the things we talk about from our museum is we don't consider ourselves a history museum or necessarily a military museum. We're a biographical museum. We're telling people's life stories. And we kind of say, they're more than a medal. You'll hear some recipients say that. I'm more than my ribbon rack. I'm more than my resume. We're more than this one day in our life. And that is how we wanted to portray the recipients. So you see young Kyle Carpenter here, and that's the uniform there that he's wearing in this photograph. But alongside that is his graduation cap from the University of South Carolina, medals from running and Marine Corps marathons, a toothbrush from his recovery after throwing himself on a grenade in Afghanistan is in one of the cases behind. We want people to start to think about who are these recipients, what got them to that moment, and what did they do after it. We do have military things. We have some things that are representative, a piece of the Arizona, as we tell Samuel Fuqua's story. We have someone like Florent Groberg, tackles a suicide bomber in Afghanistan. We have his childhood toy from when he was a boy in France. And this creates a moment. We have so many visitors who come in and go, oh, Mon Chi Chi. I remember Mon Chi Chi. But it's a chance for you to connect to a recipient. We had a staff member bring her 9-year-old in. A 9-year-old sees Flo was born in France and says, Mom, he's like you. He came to America when he was the same age. And that's what we want people to understand. Florent Groberg is more than that day he tackled that suicide bomber. He's now a father, but you see his bracelet there. He carries that with him. So we're trying to show the complex stories of these recipients. Now the one I know we all care a lot about today is Audie Murphy. He is one of our 13 recipients whose stories we really dive deeply into. And much like you heard the folks talk about with this Audie Murphy Club, we want people to understand he was more than just America's most decorated soldier in World War II. That's what people know him for. But he was so much more than that. So you can see here his display. We call him an iconic American. And here we've got a linear media piece that if we wanted to play for you, I don't know if we'll have the sound to play it. We'll try. But interactive, so you can dive more into these stories. So look at him. He was a soldier, a father, an actor. And you'll see that as you go through his exhibit, you'll see a photograph of him with some of his siblings when he was a young boy. You'll see artifacts from his life, the Life magazine that in many ways changed his own life. Some interesting things we've been able to get to put on display. We have a napkin from his first wedding. Along with that is a guest book from his wedding. So those kinds of things. And then this is actually one of his guitars that he used when he wrote music, which is something I honestly didn't know about him before I got to the museum. We want people to think about that and make that connection. Like, hey, I know I like to write music. I play music. Now suddenly I have a connection with Audie Murphy. And if we can, I don't know if we'll have luck. We're going to try. So this is, if we're successful here, one of our linear media pieces, again, we want people to get that perspective of what was his life like, but also some of the themes and things we talk about is just because you become a Medal of Honor recipient doesn't mean you live this amazing life full of ease. And so as we all know with Audie struggled, and so we want our visitor to understand that. Oh, we'll try. No, it's okay. So now you have a better reason to come to the museum and see the film. Across the museum, like I said, we have 13 of these areas where we dive deep into the stories that go from World War I to global war on terrorism. And Audie is one of those 13. And we're really happy to tell his story there. We had probably a familiar name, Dr. David Smith, do an interview for us to talk about Audie and the effects of the war on his life. But we're really happy to tell his story and others. And so we hope you all can come and see us. We're not too far down the road in Arlington. We're open 7 days a week from 10 to 5. So we hope to see you there. And I thank you all for letting me introduce the museum to you. I see some folks that have maybe visited already. So we thank you for that.
Questions? We do want to open up for questions. If you have a question, go ahead, Skipper.
I went into the RCDC the other day when I was sitting David Crockett. His breech of his rifle was broken, and he came to Bastrop of Mena, Texas, had a guy named John Berry repaired it for him. And Berry was the grandfather of Audie Murphy.
I keep joking that we should do a 6 Degrees of Audie Murphy tour. Because even within our own museum, there is actually in Audie Murphy's interactive, there's a photograph, and in that he's at it looks like a VFW event, and there's a young man in a VFW cap named Tibor Rubin. He's not yet a Medal of Honor recipient, but he receives the medal in 2005 for his actions in Korea. In that Nuremberg landscape that I told you about, the interactive, we have Keith Ware, who's Murphy's battalion commander. So we joke we could do a 6 Degrees of Audie Murphy.
Did you help design them?
Yes.
And you put a lot of human element in.
Yes. So as a senior historian, I was involved. We worked with a design firm for the design, but involved in the storytelling and how we're bringing these out, the photo selections right in the text. And that has been a big part of us, of our storytellings. We want people to be able to connect with these recipients. Because many of us, myself included, you come from the outside of these stories, and we look at these men as heroes. They'll tell you they're not. And why is that? And that's something that we kind of challenge in that intro film. You'll hear Flo and Groberg say, the Medal of Honor is a medal that no one wants because it represents the worst day of your life. And we want people to reflect on that we view them this way, but what is Flo proud of? He's being a dad. You talk to some of these guys. I had a conversation with one. I said, so what are you up to these days? 15 minutes later, I knew all about him doing real estate in the Dallas area. But that's how they want to be seen. And so, yes, we've put a lot of thought into making sure people will come away with a different view of these guys. Yes. We have 45 Medals of Honor on display in the museum right now, including the first medal ever awarded to Jacob Parrott in 1863. and the only Coast Guard medal that was awarded to Douglas Monroe. So we have medals from the 1860s up to Britt Slabinski's. It was awarded in 2018. Several from that were awarded in the 2010s. And in that design, we have a design of the medal timeline, and you can see through actual medals that have been awarded how the medal itself has changed since the 1860s.
Now, this is the National Medal of Honor Museum. Was there a price tag on this little project?
Our fundraising was about $270, $280 million. So we've had a lot of very generous supporters and partners, corporate partners, who have gotten us to this. And we just opened on March 25th, 2025. So we're still fresh and still new. Everything's still shiny.
Other question?
Oh, that will be, sir.
Yeah.
My wife and I are super excited. I'm actually a part veteran of fauna supplies and instinct. It's also called to a stock donor with Kizika. And I will stick to a program, the TBI.
Mhm.
There's freedom, this out project, a rich day in the gala.
Oh, wonderful.
So excited. Just you show your homage there, all the
Mm-hmm.
So, whereas Audie Murphy, you talk to you, so
series of truth today, and other veterans who talk about GPI treatment. Let's see other veterans live. I did say mine, but it's amazing what I'm doing.
That's awesome. I hope you have a wonderful time. And that's something you'll see through the stories is, and quite a few of them, you'll see photos of people who aren't Medal of Honor recipients. Because for a lot of those, Florent Grobert's bracelet, those are the heroes to him. And so a lot of these guys, when they tell their story, we listen, we read what do they have to say, who's important to them. And Clint Romachet, who is next to Audie Murphy, came in for the opening. And he said, what did you think? I'm really nervous. Like, oh gosh, he's looking at something I wrote about him. Said, the picture, there's a photograph of the transfer case with the remains of Stephen Mace, one of the guys killed at Cop Keating in his action. And he said, you got me. That photograph, that's what it's about. And so that's what we really want people to understand, that for these guys, we view them as the heroes, but to them, it's the men like you who serve with them that they see as the heroes. Anybody else? Oh, well, thank you all, and I hope to see you there.
Wow. What a beautiful, wonderful project. And we are going to conclude momentarily, and this is a nice dovetail to recognize the Audie Murphy family that's with us today. Coy, you make your way here and say a few words, please. And will the members of the family please stand at this time? I believe you'll tell us who they are, their nieces, and yeah.
We want to thank everybody in the committee, the museum, and everybody, the sponsors today, too, for putting this event on it. And it's just one of the most wonderful things. The Audie Murphy's nieces are back here, Rhonda Hoy, Kelly McBride, and Sandra Patterson. Two of these ladies are single. If you're interested, go open your checkbook up first and let them look at it. And these are Audie's nieces, and Sharon couldn't be here. Their sister couldn't be here today. She fell, but
and we lost Nadine.
And we lost
sister.
We lost Audie's sisters. And Terry died in February, so it's getting less. But hope everybody gets a chance to meet them. Thank you.
Thank you. These are for the please. Okay, in just a moment. Comment, sir? No? Okay. Pardon? Oh, yeah, they live in Farmersville. Is that correct? The family? Princeton. I was told that earlier. Couple quick announcements before we retire the colors, and we greatly appreciate everybody being here. The speakers were fantastic. And Kaylee, wow, you brought that museum to life. It's been a wonderful morning. Don't forget to visit the booths in the exhibit hall. They'll be open for a little while longer. We're going to break for lunch. The rest of the program will be this afternoon at the Audie Murphy American Cotton Museum. At 2 o'clock, we'll pick up again. Take some time to go through the outdoor exhibit. Now, our project, that was supposed to be about $180,000, and we only raised 70. How much did we raise? 75,000. It's a beautiful exhibit. You'll be proud of it. But we're going to expand that in the future. Don't forget, June 21st, Audie's 100th birthday. We'll have Duffy Hudson here. Great performer. Let's see. If anyone wants to attend from out of town, we do have arrangements with some of the local hotels. Okay, we're going to retire the colors. Let's stand for that, and we greatly appreciate everybody being here. Okay.
This video has been brought to you by Juice. Juice is your community-owned provider for electric, internet, cable TV, and true local programming.